On today's episode, we have Matt O'Keefe, CEO of HWPO. Matt got his start in the CrossFit world as a passionate athlete and brand owner with his clothing business Redline, before becoming athlete manager to top competitors including Matt Fraser, Katrin Davidsdottir, Brooke Wells, Annie Thorisdottir, Pat Vellner, Brent Fikowski, and more. He later served as president of Loudon Live Sports, overseeing major events like Wodapalooza and the Madrid Championship. Now leading HWPO, Matt drives the brand's growth and mission to provide world-class coaching. He's based out of Greater Boston, and he's all about pushing limits in fitness, business, and beyond. So without further ado, let's get started. Mr. Matt O'Keefe, welcome to the Brute Training Podcast. How are you?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me. Good to be with you.
No worries at all. Now, I think most of our listeners will know you as the head honcho at HWPO and your background managing a bunch of different athletes and stuff like that. I suppose what they might not know is how your life intersected with CrossFit. And I don't even know that. So I'm super curious to hear how you cross paths with CrossFit initially.
Awesome. What a great question. Thanks for asking. Honestly, I don't think that's necessarily a question I get a whole lot. It's a really interesting story. I mean, I was an athlete my whole life and played in university and had a really great career athletically. It wasn't going to, continue on professionally, or nor did I really want to run around and try to do that. I was like getting on with my professional career, and like many, and I think it had a lot to do with me being so active and focused on goals through athletics that I got a little complacent with my fitness and wellness, to be honest. And I got really out of shape and kind of woke up one day like 260 pounds fat and just like eating terribly, just not in a good spot. And so I, was like, all right, I'm going to get going. I went to a yoga studio, started doing some yoga. I coached. I was funny. I was talking to the new owner and CEO of TRX last week because I became a TRX instructor eventually. And that was kind of how, like, I got back in shape that way. And it's funny. I had lunch with this guy today. My boss at the time was like, hey, I'm gonna try this thing that we drove by all the time. One of the original CrossFit gyms in the world was in my hometown. It was like the 10th affiliate globally. He's like, I want to try this thing out. And he's like, would you do it with me? And I was like, sure, I'll give it a whirl. Went over there, and so did my baseline. Showed up for a class. They told me show up Thursday. We'll kind of brief you when you get there. I walked in. The long story short, I walked into an open workout. And the first workout I ever did in a CrossFit gym was 7 minutes of burpees. And so it was that year in the open. And it was, most people would be like, oh, that's terrible. But for me, it was like the hook that needed to be put in my mouth that I was in forever. It was just like I had somebody screaming at me. Yeah, I mean, I had this guy with a clipboard yelling at me. I'm like, why has he got a clipboard? And like, I thought we were working out, and he's screaming at me to do more, go faster. And, and I got that, like, that taste in your mouth you get when you like go to your limit. And, I was like on the floor riding after, and I'm like, and I was hooked. I mean, just like got into me. I was like, oh, I can get healthy and well, and I can compete at the same time because I'm unhealthy competitive. It was just like the perfect, time and place and thing for me to walk into at the time. And, you could say like the rest is history, but my journey there was just, I got really, stronger and fitter and, better physically and mentally than I had ever been in my life, which is so fascinating to me with the tools and resources I had as an athlete at a high-end university in the United States. And that's really where the base was laid for me forever. It was just like, wow, this is effective. It works, and it's it's put me in the best position physically and mentally I've ever been in my life. I'm in, and the rest is history. I mean, that was it for me. It's just, the hardest thing for most, like for me, was to walk through that door because I had looked at it for years. And I was like, weights over your head and, all this. I'm like, I think I'm good. I used to watch it on TV in awe, honestly. I told Annie Sakamoto at the Rogue Invitational, I was like, I started CrossFit a lot because of you. I used to watch this like little girl moving these huge weights on that floor in Carson and watching it on ESPN. And I was like, man, you inspired me. It's, so yeah, it's been a wild ride and journey, but that first step was hard, as it is probably for anybody listening.
100%, man. And how old were you at that point? So you said coming out of college?
No, 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 no. Yeah, that was like I had kind of like come out of college and like became a fat working person that didn't pay any attention to their wellness, and that's not critical because that was me. I was it, and it was like 32 or 3 years old at the time, 30, yeah, something like that.
So you
So
had a long time
still.
to fall into the corporate groove.
Yeah, I did. Oh, I settled in well. I got out of school and I went into a family business, which was immediately this like extreme immersion in business. My parents owned a car dealership, and so I like was just like, and it's I don't know what it's like in Australia. It's just a hard industry here. It's a lot of
Very much so.
hours,
Yeah.
and it's not like a good lifestyle. And that's kind of where it happened. It was like, time to pay attention to myself in a gym wasn't there. It was like, okay. And eating lunch was like, a sub on the run, like a sandwich. And it was like, I just got in a bad eating cycle, and, food can quickly get their hooks in you. And I was just like, not taking care of myself, not sleeping. And then naturally with, car dealership, it's like, okay, 8 o'clock, the doors close. Hey, let's go get a couple beers down the street. It's like, anyway, I had fun, but it was time. So it was a bit after college.
And that was your first immersion in business as well, was the family car dealership?
It was, yeah, it was. It was kind of my intention, and I think that's probably what I described. I didn't like chase anything professionally on the athletic side, is because I just kind of had always had my sights on that. I liked what my dad did; he's really good at it. I wanted to work with him. He and I are very close, and so it's just kind of like a natural. I mean, and honestly, like the opportunity to own a car dealership was like, dude, I'm an idiot. Like I need to go do this and try this, and
100%. Yeah.
I hated it, so but I learned more there than I did my whole life anywhere else. Like it was just a great like graduate school type of experience for business.
What brand of car was the dealership, or was it sort of like everything, or was it
No,
one
no, it was
specific?
new. Yeah, it was a franchised auto dealership. It was Chevrolet.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah.
we were Oldsmobile at one time as well, but that closed down at some point along the way, so we became just Chevrolet.
I
So
think the
I'm a GM guy.
GM guy, yeah, for sure. I think
Yeah.
it's one of those industries where it's like a real romantic idea. Like there's often industries where people on the outside looking in are like, "Oh, it'd be great to own one," but then the reality of it, they're completely unaware.
It's an interesting business. The older I get and the more I spend, time doing, business here or I have in other places, I had a little bit of a transitional phase between working there and insurance, selling insurance into then now my now life with fitness and wellness. Man, I just look fondly on it. It's just a very diverse environment. There's, a body shop, a shop for fixing the cars. There's parts department. There's an operations team that handles a lot of the books and accounting, and then there's the sales team. And I went through the schooling where you would like go 2 weeks and you'd learn the parts department, and then you come back and work in the parts department for 2 months. And I was like, now that I look back, I'm like, wow, like what a genius approach. And if I was like, and I do give advice quite a bit now. It's like people ask me like, "Hey, what should I do? I don't know what I want to do." I'm like, "Go work in a car dealership for like 6 months." It's hard. You
Yeah.
gotta, you eat what you kill in that environment too, right? It's like you gotta produce business in order to get paid, and you gotta take care of people or they don't come back. You just like learn a lot of great, values around business that are invaluable, and they have been to me in my career.
I think it's like you guys have that a fair bit over there, more so than over here in Australia, where a lot of industries are like that. You eat what you kill, in a sense that, like even hospitality over there. I know it's not necessarily the right way to do it, but everyone's working for their tips. It's not a given. Um, so it always feels when I come over there that everyone in certain industries is going above and beyond because they're working for their pay rather than over here in a lot of other parts of the world. I think it's like your pay is sort of like a given as long as you're meeting that bare minimum requirement. then you're good. But
it's so in that it's so funny you bring that up. Is like I've had that debate at times too. Is like because I travel so much, and it's like I love being particularly in Australia, honestly, and it's just like that's an example of like one thing that is like a part of a million things that it just creates a better vibe from my perspective. I just think
yeah,
it's like tense and aggressive here and like everybody's chasing all the time. And it is that. It's like, you go to a restaurant and they're chasing tips and that's the way it's structured, right? And they should be. But then you go to a restaurant there and it's like service is great. People are compensated for the role, whether they're, whether or not they might do a good job,
yeah.
but it's like more of a structured business in that regard, right? Yeah, it's that is an interesting debate. It's aggressive here for sure. I mean, for people non-American listening, it's like and you haven't been or don't know much about it. It's like a dog eat dog world over here for sure.
And it's tough. Like I often have it, and it's a nuanced thing for it to not come across as disingenuous. Like for someone to actually provide good service without you thinking that they're providing good service just because of, well, the outcome of getting a better tip or something like that. And I think that's where the key in it lies, is if they can somehow make you feel as though it's genuine. Me anyway, I'm more inclined to want to tip more generously in that scenario than when you feel like they're turning it on just for the dollars.
Totally agree. And I think that's the environment that is in like Australia and Europe. It's like, you tip extra in those moments, right? And people aren't necessarily chasing it. Yeah, I mean, we're in that industry too. It's like, service and what do you focus on, well, and as a business in an operator, you have to success and revenues and how to create them and produce and run a sound and quality business. But the answers to that are the things you do in order to get there, right? And it's that you can't create that genuine environment unless that starts at the top with people that truly just want to take care of people. And then if you're in a service industry, it's like your people, I'm sure, because I know you well enough now, they're on point. Like we take care of people first. Like the food's got to be right. I don't care if it gets thrown in the barrel, we got to restart. The coffee should be that's it. If you take care of people, you win. And but you got to want to take care of people. You can't just like be inauthentic to it to win.
It's that whole dichotomy of the byproduct being the business doing well. Like you set up all these things of genuinely looking after people. You make sure that they feel comfortable, secure, and safe in their role, allows them to operate more freely, more naturally, be themselves more, and then that on flow is ultimately going to help your business. But you're right. My point of view as well is you can't do that with that being the goal. You sort of have to have, you
Right.
know, things in the right place within yourself of what you expect from people and what you want to provide them. And then it's sort of like the on flow from that is in the good stuff for you. But a lot of people find it hard to make that jump because you're always told that the goal in business, and ultimately it is, you've got to make a living and make something for yourself. But it can seem counterintuitive to put your people first, and then you'll reap what you sow.
Well, that's leadership too. It's like, how you measure those people, would then help it. It's like, hey, if you're measuring revenues, guess what? You're telling them about, what they need to focus on, right? And I've given this talk a couple times at this coaching congress event that, they were in Australia for
Down
Down Under
under.
Championship.
Yep.
And it's about giving as a method of business, essentially, as an approach and a style. It's off of a book called Go Giver. It's a really cool book for people to read, and it's just it's the idea of like doing things for the right reasons and it producing, and genuinely looking at how you provide and over deliver, and that is how and when we focus on those things as leadership and or people that are doing, that's where we actually get where we're you know where the prototypical focus would be around revenues or business success.
Yeah, and 100%. And I think like giving is a counterintuitive way to go about it, but if you can make people feel valued, I'm taking the customer valued and special, then they're going to be more inclined to be a long-term customer, and or purchase more at that time. So I think it's a good approach, even from a business perspective, even though it does seem on the surface quite counterintuitive.
Totally. Couldn't agree.
And especially if you're talking to like business owners that are potentially struggling, or they're, things aren't going great for them, it's hard in that headspace to get someone to be like, yeah, giving away stuff's going to be the solution to my problems, right?
It's so true. It's, yeah, let's be careful with this, right? If people are taking advice, there's a process to this, and there's a belief that needs to live like inherently inside you, that path, or you have to really dig into that path. It's not like, hey, go give out a bunch of like, go give every cup of coffee away tomorrow and that's going to fix it, because there's a lot more to this.
There's,
You're
yeah,
too spot
there
on.
is.
Thank you. Thank you for the disclaimer. I got everybody that's listening going out and just giving shit away for free and then going out of
It's the
business. Don't
business
do
model, yeah.
that.
I want to jump back to what we said about you growing up in the dealership, and I've sort of reflected on this recently in my life too. Is that, what do you think the role of growing up seeing your parents having done business did in giving you, I suppose, the framework or the self belief that it's even possible to do it? Because I know a lot of people, anecdotally, that have grown up with parents that, work a 9 to 5 job, they're employed by someone. And in my experience, it's always been a lot more difficult for those kinds of people to go out and start their own business or back themselves, because it's not something that they grew up as the norm, right?
Oh, yeah. It's such a good question. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I hit the lottery, struck gold with the parents I had. And I say that because of the empowerment that they gave me. It was such a great mix too, of personalities. My mother and my father's a very kind individual as well, but my mother is, who has passed on in the last 5 years, super kind, sweet, and the most, selfless person I've ever been around in my entire life. And she worked in an industry that I think was perfect for that. They owned the dealership together. My mother didn't work day to day there. She helped run a hospital in Boston,
Oh, wow.
and she was on for a long time, ran an OR at a very at a hospital here local, and then moved into Boston to the specialty hospital called Mass Eye and Ear, which is like the number one hospital for head, neck, and throat in the world. And so a lot of people come in from around the world, especially those who have the resources to do it, to get their stuff taken care of in that regard there. So there's like a kings of countries and
Yeah,
athletes from
wow.
around the world. And my mother was in charge of taking care of that crew at the backside of her career. And it's funny when she retired, just to like, get to engage with people that were around her and hear about, how she went about her days and her work. And just like, you know, took care of people more than people ever imagined they could be taken care of. So that was like my experience with her. And she was always, the encourager and the empowerer, like, you can do whatever you want, like, just put your mind to it. Look, when you put your mind to something, you win. And she was a great athlete too. So I got a lot of that from her. She was competitive, but in a kind way. My father was a killer. Like, if I'm being real, like, he was just a sales guy, always, on the go and move and producing. And, one thing stopped, the other thing started, and he was successful. And, I learned from him that you can do anything you put your mind to as well. And, what you do is you build your toolbox, and then there's nothing can get in your way. No matter what failure might be in front of you, you still have those tools. You retain those experiences, and that helps you be better for the next. And, he was very entrepreneurial, which I inherited, but I had a hard time getting over the hump to take that bet on myself. But I watched him bet over and over. And I think that really helped me do that, because I was like, all right, my old man did this many times and he's even failed. So I just like lived in a house that was, really just, you can do it, always. And it was, that fueled my athletic success, because it wasn't like always important that I had success. It was like, hey, be classy, be a good teammate, and do your best, like, give your best. And if I had like tough conversations at home, it was surrounding those things. It wasn't like you didn't get a hit tonight in the game, or, you didn't score a goal. It was like, dude, you got to be a better teammate, or like, that was unprofessional, or, so I was held to a high standard on those things, not, winning and losing, or like being, accomplishing something maybe beyond my abilities, like it was a cool, loving home, and very highly in the right way motivated.
It sounds like they just reframed what success meant in a really positive way. Like they gave you more than one metric to succeed at, which I think is missing at large in society these days. Is that, or especially the CrossFit space, it's sort of like you don't achieve your goal, wasn't a success. When there's all these other things along the way, it's like, how did you conduct yourself? How did you show up? How are you for other people? There's a million other metrics you can choose, and it ultimately is up to you whether you frame them as successes or failures, right?
100%. It kind of goes back to a little bit what we were talking about before. It's like, are you focused on one thing, like winning or the revenue, or all the factors that might get you there, And it's, that's, I guess, what I grabbed the most from them was just this idea of, targets are great, goals are great, but like, quite frankly, there's a lot of distance between you and that always, and you've got to do the little things along the way in order to get there, and then that stuff takes care of itself. It's I guess I'm fortunate in that regard. Like, I don't think I've like, I've never thought of like, sort of like what that like is like for everybody else. It just was a pretty natural environment for me. It was like, so funny. You hear so much today of like athletes in general globally. And it wasn't much what people were saying in the 70s, 80s, and 90s was like pursuing their best, this whole idea of like, the best version of myself. I was just brought up that way, in a cool way. And I guess, it was as a kid, even like, what, this is different. Like, is it weird? Like, am I not doing the right things here? It's
The
like
right thing,
my
yeah.
best self. It's like, no, I want a trophy. I want to win, It's like, but yeah, I mean, I think that's where the fortune was for me in my home environment. It was just, because that is what produces. And that's, it's so funny. I have a son, 17, he's, third year of high school, one more year, and then he goes off to university. And, I'm, trying to, use my, prior experiences with my parents parenting me, and like, infuse, my feelings and experience into like what I think is maybe even a better structure forward. But I just fall back on the same things. I'm like, man, this is awesome. It's like, dude, I don't care if you play college football or like go to the pros. I'm like, I just want you to be a good teammate. I want you to show up ready, prepared, and I want you to be a good person, and be your best, right? Like,
Yeah.
just give your best to things. And it's like, because we do have a lot of talks about he's driven in some stuff with sports, and it's like, dude, that stuff doesn't matter like overall in the grand scheme of things. What does is, though, you're on a team, be the teammate that will run through that wall. That's what I want to teach him, is like, you'll do anything for those people around you. And I think that's probably like, if I look at if I had to say one thing I learned the most from my dad, it was being a good teammate
Yeah.
and what that meant. And that is one of the most unbelievable skills people can obtain, is being a good teammate. Because quite frankly, if you look at it, all you do is work on a team your whole life. Your home
100%.
family is a team, your work family is a team, your friends are a team. You go play sports on the weekend because you're casually trying to get workouts, and on a basketball team or, flag football team. Like, everything's team, and you got to play well with others, and you got to know how to be your best, and better than that, help them be theirs. So I think that's, I don't know if that answers your question, but
It
that's been
does
my
indeed, yeah.
experience, and I'm trying to help with my kids that way too.
And yeah, I think it's like spreading that message for people that potentially didn't have that. Because yeah, like I said, from my point of view, I've had people that I've gone into business with that never had that growing up, and there's a lot more roadblocks and hurdles in the way mentally, and emotionally about. There's an uncertainty that comes with business ownership, um, and a whole bunch of other stuff that aren't necessarily natural skills for people that weren't brought up in that environment. So
That's hard. Like, you and I relate on a lot of these things on the business ownership side. And it's like, because it's all about people, but like, it's like, how can you mold that to people, or find people that, because it isn't as common as, I guess, where I'm going with this. It's that skill, I find, highly, I would rank very high on a priority list for, a skill as I'm interviewing somebody, or, what their, history is and or training in the past. But it's hard to teach, honestly, later in life. I've found. I mean, I don't know
It
if I'm
is,
just
yeah.
not a good teacher.
No, it's
Um,
hard.
it's hard because I think they're just like, there's emotional value there. There's, a lot of how your upbringing comes with that. It's and again, like, it's not necessarily how I think a lot of people are brought up. So it's a different look. It's like a very 180 look.
Well, I've always said, like, in my opinion, like the biggest determiner of success in business is your ability to deal with uncertainty. And if you can't get over that initial hurdle, you're going to have a real hard time because there's a lot of uncertainty.
Oh, some good God, is there? I mean, how many days? Like, as my age and in part, the point at which I'm in my career, I look, when the moments are like everything's humming and good, I step back and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna look at this and be like, this is awesome right now, because it ain't gonna be like
It's
that
not
for another minute or two,
100%, man. 100%. I'm
Yeah.
I'm like that too. I'm like, oh fuck, everything's gone firing on all cylinders, and I'm expecting something to go wrong now.
And almost on cue it comes.
Exactly right.
It, I mean, maybe that's what we probably love the most, though. It's like problem solving at that point.
Putting out fires.
Putting out fires is a better way to put it. Yes.
But that's all part of the, like, I think you innately either enjoy that, like you said, or you find that super stressful and it compounds and you have a nervous breakdown. So I think it just depends how you're naturally hardwired,
It's
to
very
either
true.
thrive or sink.
That stuff will break. Yeah, I mean, it's hard out there, in that regard. And I think you're right. Like, but I think in the end, you just have to have a really good perspective. I mean, I think on the, if you're mentally getting coached around those things, it's like identifications. A lot of things that people will talk about is like, how you identify, and identifying too much one place is where, I'm an all in type of guy. So I have a hard time with that stuff. It's like, I think that produces, but I think, again, I mean, we're talking to people that might be listening that are newer or thinking about, how they might, approach their entrepreneurial journey or the business aspect of their life. I think go ahead and break your soul a little bit here and there. Like, I think it's important. I mean, honestly, go chase something because you love it and want it, and put your heart on the line. I think that's how you're going to learn and be able to actually do that right the next time around. You got to put yourself out is the point, right? Like, I mean, you've done it a million times. It's like you're not going to get anywhere sitting on your couch thinking about these great ideas that you could do. You got to go do them and lose. And that's how
Yeah,
you get where you want to get long term.
it is. It's that cliche of, like, get knocked down 8 times, stand up nine. But I think it rings true in a sense that you have to be able to give 100% of yourself to something, accept it may not work, and then when it doesn't work, accept or be willing to give 100% again. What I see with a lot of people is they'll give 100% the first time, it might not work. Then, like, their self preservation kicks in. So next time they might only be able to give 95% of themselves, so on and so forth. You get down the track of life, you're all of a sudden giving 60% of yourself to something because of the fear that it might take your soul. But it's that ability, in my opinion anyway, to be able to keep re upping even when it doesn't work out.
I think I learned that through sports the most, really. And mostly, honestly, more than ever in my later sport life with golf.
Yeah,
I tried competitive golf at a point after college. And if you don't have a short memory, you can't play that sport. It's like, it's hole to hole. And I've got a really good friend who plays on tour that, I've talked a lot with about this particularly. And it's so true. It's like, you have to have like you know, you have to be like a fish. Like, you got to be able to forget in like 12 seconds what happened. That's life. I mean, that's just
literally.
not golf. It really is. You're so spot on. I go through this every single day. I'm going to be
Yeah,
real. Like, I
yeah,
literally go through this every day where like I got kicked in the crotch and got no, and I'm letting it affect something else. You can't, because you know what? That's just a fact of this. Like, you're going to lose more than you're going to win. You know,
And if
you
you
have,
carry
I
that,
have,
yeah,
you
if you're
know,
going to carry that into the next thing you do, so say like yourself, for example, you've got multiple things on the go, you take a loss in one thing, you let that permeate into how you show up in the other things, that's just going to snowball into more negativity. You have to be able to put that like dam up and be like,
that's it.
okay, and compartmentalize, that was shit there, but I still got all this other shit that I have to show up for as I normally am. I can't be like putting the bullshit from that on them, because then that's just going to keep snowballing into more negativity, right?
The best analogy is working home. Like, you know, you go
Yes.
work and you bring it home, and then you know, and then all of a sudden you wake up and your wife doesn't like you, and it's like, what happened? Well, you're being a dick, you know, because you're bringing it home. You know, it's like, it's so true though. It really is.
Yeah.
It's like you couldn't, you know, I mean, I think about my life, and you know, some of the stuff's changed now, but it's like, you know, when my kids are growing up, it's like I'd work really hard. I was doing this, I'm running around the world, and then I'd come home and I'd coach, you know, and I saw that. I'd be like, you know, a little short at, you know, coaching, you know, my kid's soccer team, you know, on a Tuesday in a practice because like they weren't listening. And it's like, dude, don't do that. Like you got to leave that shit in where you were before. Like these kids are amazing. You know, it's like you can't be like, you know, shut up, stop talking. Like that kid, you can't do it. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, um, well, you can do whatever you want. You're just not going to be successful. You
Successful.
know,
Yeah,
it's,
correct.
yeah, that's it.
100%.
You know, kids will teach you a lot, and they'll spit you out fast too. By the way,
Well, yeah,
on that
I
side,
can't speak on that one just yet, but I'll definitely take your word. I've definitely seen it with people. Everyone says they're the best mirror you'll ever get in regards to sorting your own shit out.
it's so damn true. It's like, you know, I was kind of describing where I'm at in my parenting cycle now. It's like I'm staring myself in the face right now with my 17-year-old son, and things that I'm like, you know, maybe, you know, can get easily irritated with or like want to help him and focus on. I'm like, dude, you did this. Like, stop, you know? It's so true. Like they give you, it's a sick, twisted, you know, virtue. I don't know where it comes from, but you get exactly what you deserve to get.
Get
You
it
get it
dished
right
up, yeah.
back. Yeah.
Now, how do we? So we went from dealership to insurance, and then what was the first foray into business in the fitness space, or what did that look like for you?
Yeah, we went. You know, I'm at that CrossFit gym, North Shore CrossFit, by the way, which is, you know, and if you look at, you know, on CrossFit's website, they have that stuff listed in order now.
Yeah,
They're like number 5 or 6 or 10 or whatever. So it was a cool place to start. But I joined there, and you know, I told you I had this great first day experience, which was like rocket ship catalyst for me. I wanted to compete, go to the games like within a week. You know, I'm like, I was in. But I immediately looked at it, you know, and got really engaged in the sport. And I'm like, oh man, there's opportunity here. And I was like, here we go. I'm being entrepreneurial again and not going to do anything about it. I'm being negative with myself immediately with that because I hadn't really stepped out yet. Like I had, you know, gone to my family business, and then I didn't like that. I ended up selling insurance, hated that worse. And by the way, two of the greatest people I've ever had in my life were my bosses at this insurance company. It's just, I didn't like the process. They were so cool. By the way, transitionally, they realized it. And, you know, I went and started a business, is where I'm going with this. I started a clothing company because I was like, oh, you know, this market's bumping. Like people are really excited about it. I started this company called Redline Gear, which was Matt's first sponsor, which where that kind of came through. But I started this and was working insurance, and my bosses at the time sat me down. I'm like, oh, I'm getting fired. Like, this is crazy. What's going on right now? And they're like, hey, you love that. You know, we love you. You don't like this job. You're good at it, but we'll just pay you for a year. Why don't you go chase that? And then after a year, you
wow,
can transition your clients. And I just had lunch with one of them today. And it's like, every time I sit with him, I'm like, you changed my life. Like in no, like the way maybe nobody else did. I'm like, I
crazy.
could have never done anything I did without him doing that for me. Like I would have just never been able to get anywhere. And
That is
so I
so
started,
generous.
I mean, crazy. Yeah. And I learned a lot about the right approach from them, that, you know, with that was just a bit, that was big. That was big. That was a big thing for anyone to do. And yeah, I started Redline Gear, and it was so fun. It was just a time in the CrossFit space that things were like, you could like, show up with anything at that point. People were so engaged, at least here at that point in like 13, 12, 13, 14, that they buy it, the socks, the knee socks, and like, it
Everything.
just looked different than, so I made those board shorts with Velcro belts, and, we had, it's just, and it was a cool brand that I think resonated with me, with the space red line, going your limit,
Yeah.
and it was like, I was like, hey, you got any sponsors? He's like, nope, don't even know what that means. I gave him a t-shirt and kind of took off with that business. But that was, that was how I got in the fitness world, with it mostly just being like, hey, like I can learn something here, maybe a side project, and had no sort of vision that that would be something that would stick and get me where I am today at all, by the way. But like, or it being a sustaining opportunity for me to just do that. And it was quickly. It was really cool. We showed up at regionals that year, that our first year, and it was uh, Matt's second regional. So it was like 14, I think. We showed up at this regional in the Northeast, and it used to be hosted at Reebok, and we just did, gangbusters. We were like, we just had good vibes around us, a lot of good people that were, willing to hang out with us. It took off. It was awesome. And we went to the games and had a blast. Matt finished, second that year. And, he and I were just, sponsor and, athlete at that point, sort of just supporting him. Our relationship obviously flourished from there, but that was the start.
And so you segued from that into management side of things naturally from like that initial relationship with Matt, that sort of, I suppose, developed into the
It
management.
did. Yeah, I don't, it's so interesting to, he and I have some fun sometimes, like going through photos and like you're reflecting, especially lately. I guess that's what old people do. So I'm getting old. And but we're, truly that was genuinely just this like, hey, he's like this, like, you know, and he, left this just like this scared kid, didn't trust anybody, had so much talent. I saw it. He knew it a bit, but like he didn't necessarily even see it in himself. And I was just protective, and I think the genuineness of that protectiveness, I think, I just was involved with his life quickly, because, and it was not to be an agent, or like, it was just like, hey, he was a great kid, and we were, doing some work together, but I guess I had been around long enough to know the world was not as kind as maybe everybody thought it was. And I was like, hey dude, like, let me just like look out for you. And my wife's a lawyer, so we were just kind of like watching out for the kid, to be honest with you. And like he'd get stuff and I'd be like, hey, like, do not sign that. You got to go back and ask for more money.
Yeah.
And I think like as that stuff started to play out, I was like, oh, I'm not bad at this. And I definitely grew up as a kid, like working in sports, like as a, a GM of a team or an agent. Those were very attractive things to me. And I think it kind of like energized that in me from my youth. I was like, I want to do this. I'm like, hey, can I be your agent? And he was a little apprehensive at first for the title, to be honest with you. He's like, what? Like, why do we have to call it that?
Make it
Can't we
so
just hang
official.
out?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, you know, attachment issues. Yes. No, but we kind of like, went back and forth, but I was like, whatever, we'll just keep doing it. And then I think the moment that all changed was we were at Granite Games in like 14 or 15. He's competing, and we're kind of like hiding in locker rooms after workouts because he's now prominent. Like, it's starting to boom, and that was a big boom time. And he was like, hey, I was just talking to this female athlete, and she's kind of asking me like, how do I have so many deals? And I told her you. And would you talk to her? And it was Brooke Ents. I was like, sure, I'd love to catch up with her. I know of her, and and that was my second client. I was like, she was like, will you do what you do for Matt for me? And I was like, you know what? Shit, I'll do that. I'll try that. I'm like, oh, I guess I'm an agent now. I set up an agency. Funny, when I started that, I started with this guy, Josh Holmes. We were, two-headed monster here. And his wife to be was Christmas Abbott. There's a blast from the past that a lot of CrossFitters would not remember maybe. But she, she's still got a big following. She was fitness influence after CrossFit, but she was initially a CrossFit Games athlete, and she was on some reality TV shows and whatnot. They didn't end up working out, but it was like he was representing his, to be wife, Christmas, and she was a big figure, had 1 million followers before it was fashionable. I had Matt and Brooke, and that's kind of how we launched, and in a time where, like, quite frankly, agents were probably more annoying than anything to brands because it was like not massive time stuff. And especially to brands where like, hey, I take care of people. Like, I don't need you in the way of this. And,
Mm.
um, but I think the vision was like, this could be something more. And, we all saw it. And it was like, I think we all thought of a part in it, which we could help professionalize it. And I guess I saw that as my angle. I was like, you know what? This needs to be professionalized. Like, guys like Matt need to be protected. The deals were getting super real, life changing, even at times. And it was like, something I was interested in. So that's kind of how I pivoted.
Yeah, I think what's I'm super curious about, and obviously we don't have to go into the nitty gritty because probably be confidential and all that. But with that, at that point in time, it was still such a new sport. And say if you were an agent in any other sport, tennis, football, soccer, whatever, there's a bunch of precedent at which deals would be based upon, right? Um, so I suppose it's easier for agents and even the sponsors themselves to be like, okay, this is kind of what we did for this person. It's a similar situation. You got a ballpark to work off of. What I'm curious about is how do you go about manufacturing that at the start when there is no precedent, really? There's none. And it's like, how do you quantify the worth and even know what to ask for or know what you think it's worth? And I think I'm super curious on that because that's a very unique thing in sport because it's not often that there are these young new sports, right?
It is. And I think that's where maybe my personality or my past helped in this was just being collaborative and, being open in communication and looking, because it was hard. Don't get me wrong. I had a mentor, by the way, but the mentor was a basketball and golf agent and had big stuff. And it was like, so there's nothing to relate to here other than like, how do I maybe, process a deal or like, what's the right negotiation structure or tactics or whatever. Um, or like, how's it working with Nike? He had a bunch. I had never, right? But I think it was, especially like when you talked about like endemic brands, which were really it for at the time, like Reebok was kind of it on the like the big global brand play. And, and honestly, the only one I really had an at bat with that at that early stage was Matt because they were selective, and when he got some prominence. But so my point I'm making is like there are a lot of brands endemic to fitness or CrossFit. And it was kind of like, how do we build a collaborative relationship that we can grow together on and then have touch points along the way to communicate if it's not working? And I think a lot of people that maybe are from my past will smile because, we didn't know what we were doing, is the answer to that. And we just kind of were like, okay, cool. Like, at least we're honest with each other about it. And, I'm here to make sure that kid gets taken care of, and, be some accountability in this relationship, and nothing's for free from you to him or him to you. Like that's
Yeah.
the way it should be, right? And it's hey, I then would set those up, and then the immediate thing that I think I probably had impact on with my clients, so the athletes, was like, hey, you over effing deliver, like, and
Yeah.
that's where we got to be at with this, and it's still there today, right? It's like, I mean, we've come so far, and there's millions and millions of dollars running through these systems, and it's just not, but for me it's still so developmental that we still have to have that mentality, and people around me do, and people that I've worked with on the agency, I still have ownership in an agency, Cooper and Daniel, that's their approach. I don't need to tell them that, they just know, and that's how, when we sort of like, I cut my teeth and I was alone. It was me and Jason St. Clair, who is now a business partner of mine in lab, and he doesn't really do much more of it anymore, he's running some other stuff, but honestly, the two of us were on our own, not knowing what we were doing on this side. And he was a baseball agent to prove that. Is like he negotiated contracts for MLB athletes. And it was still like he could take some learnings over there. But like I think he probably would tell you this, is every time he maybe applied energy towards how it would be structured in a baseball world for a baseball athlete, he got spit out here because they're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever. It needed some time and under tension. It's funny. The number one thing my entire career I wrestled with is like, did I always get, maximize the opportunity for my clients? And, I lost sleep over that my whole life and, even do sometimes today because I'm critical of myself. And, when if I really am, standing 10,000 foot above it, it's like I did. And we also have to remember what you're saying is like this environment was so new and fresh. It was like you could have broke it, is where I'm going with this. And that
Mm.
was what I was hyper aware of is that, a brand startup, because I also remember was on the brand side. So I'm like doing some deals, which was unique. But I'm like, hey, if I go too far, this guy's going to go out of business and there's no money. And that I could instill in my clients. I was just like,
Yeah.
hey, my job's to move the needle here, but my job's also so that they're here 10 years from now and still paying you, and that you've helped them do that and we built a long-term relationship. My only guarantee is we'll get better along the way and we'll make more money. I promise you
Yeah.
that.
And I suppose it's not like NFL or anything like that where you're negotiating like the difference between an $18 million deal and a $21 million deal. Like, I mean, that's really not going to have an impact on someone's life long term, is it?
Right.
It's, we're talking about numbers that are probably larger percentage, less dollar figure, but the percentage difference is bigger, and that
Significant.
could potentially have a bigger impact on someone's. And that's what I was going to ask you, if you ever were sort of fearful that you left too much on the table for people just because of potentially not asking or putting forward enough, thinking that it was unrealistic or whatnot. Um, because it is,
Every
like you
day.
said, it's the Wild West. It's unknown. It's all new.
Yeah, every day I had that, on my conscience in a good way. Like it just was great accountability for me. And I learned a lot from other sports. It's like, having a mentor in other sports and then, getting the opportunity to work, with brands like Nike and Reebok, and Under Armour and Adidas and all these players around it that started to think about, how do I get in on that space is growing. Super proud moments too, because you see big brands that have legacy that are now seeing an opportunity and value in what we're doing in our space. That's how collectively everybody did a good job and got to a point where they wanted to come in and be a part of it, right? But you learn from people there and people in other sports. And what I learned, which was like maybe one of the things CrossFit was that a lot of other those sports weren't, was it was there was money spread further. And most sports, people don't realize this. Like watch, American NFL football. You look at them and you're like, wow, like everybody's making so much money. They are a lot of them are contractually, right? But endorsements a total different world. It's so top heavy. There's probably 10 guys getting shoe deals in the NFL. People are like, you're out of your mind. I'm like, no, I know exactly what from experience now what I'm talking about. Like Nike gives them all whatever they want, but pay them, there's not many of those, and that's what I learned, about, how other sports work, which was, in equal pay. Like, there aren't a lot of sports where men and women are making the same types of money. There's like really some cool features and differentiators here in this space that I think we're unique, uh, that I'm proud of too, right? But it's yeah, I mean, I had a lot of help, but it's a lonely place in a new sport. If anybody is like listening and that's it, and you're starting in, some new sport with endorsement, it's hard. What all I can tell you is you got to be careful because you can break people's backs really easy. And by the way, I did that and I'm not proud of that. I'm not celebrating it unknowingly. You just like over push deals and those
Yeah.
brands, do they not exist because I overpush them? It's a part of the formula,
Yeah.
probably, because if I was, others were, and
Everyone
like
was, yeah.
that stuff added up. But I definitely made mistakes on that front and tried to do that and push, which was my job. But it's hard, man. It's not easy. It's yeah. There's no book on it. Is the answer to that, right? There's no like manual. It's relationships and caring and, doing the right thing and playing long game.
And do you think, so with other sports, the more traditional sports, and you hear stories all the time, like for example, you hear like Cristiano Ronaldo, the soccer player, he'll sign a new deal. There's some crazy transfer fee of 100 million pounds, or probably way more than that, but I'm just using that as an example. And you hear that the club that's taking him over makes that almost within a week or overnight from jersey sales, right? So these traditional sports have such a huge direct line between, association or sponsorship and sales. Putting your hat on the other side of the fence, because you've been on both sides of the fence, is there yet a real impact that the athletes have on these brands actually being more successful?
The answer is yes. I think there's lots of unique different ways that has and still does occur. It's interesting today, like you look at that in the Ronaldo example, and I think what we've become is way more data driven over time. It's like when we started out with back in 14 and 13. I mean, yeah, there's definitely data, but like from a social perspective, how that produced, none of that existed. And if anybody says it did, they're lying. Okay, it wasn't at that point. At that point, it was like
Yeah.
it's like, oh, he's got 1 million followers, like we can make something of this, and we would learn what that meant over time. That was the data, right? But I don't remember what was the question. Sorry, I want to make
Whether
sure I'm not
no,
off track.
that's okay. Whether so for the brands in CrossFit, whether
Yeah,
the involvement and the sponsorship of
impact.
these big players actually has as big an impact as it does in the more traditional sports in terms of direct
Yeah,
correlation to sales.
yeah, great. So, in my experience, I've had some situations that there has been that impact at that level with Matt. Think about the Metcon shoe franchise. He was in there to help start that, build that, mold that. There's things Nike would tell you in that regard that the impact that he just had a heavy hand. He really did, and at a level that was very different for our space. Moved a lot of product, sold a lot of shoes. It was crazy. It just and that's not always all on him, but like his signature shoes, and still to this day we experience it with Wild on Earth. Like we put something like that out for him, it's gone quick.
Yeah.
I know people, some people have it with that, and there's others too. There's a lot of, females I can reference that do that. I worked with Katrin since she was a kid, Brooke Wells since she was a kid, and kid meaning it, like 18-year-old kids is when I started with them. They've had, layers of that impact, through either signature products or products in general. And you look at brands that these people associated with, and their impact. It's like, take Noble, for instance, at the time. It's like, you had Brooke, Katrin, and Tia coming on board, and that company went through the roof. Rocket ship grew, and it just them? Maybe not just them, but I got to tell you, it was a lot of them because it was just a vibe, and it was like a culture that was built and an understanding and a movement around what it meant and like how the product made you feel. And so yeah, there is examples of that in our space for sure. And it's maybe a lot of them are at like a different scale, but I think per capita, I guess is the way to describe it, it's the same impact. We just have a space that's evolving and growing. And we are in interesting times right now for sure in terms of what that means and is. And it can be stressful for sure, but it's athletes still have that ability. There's some people today that still do move that needle that way. It's definitely like a settled business environment around that type of stuff. I think, there's some complacency, and that's not critical. I think that's just me. Like, that's just a status. There's, fans, depending on regionally where you're at, or, flattening or leveling off or decreasing a little bit, so there's definitely, work to be done or continue to be done, or maybe even we need to step back and look at it the way we did in 15, 16, and 17 in some regards. But there's still that impact out there. I mean, there's some some of the Brute Boys, are examples of people that have great impact on brands. Jason,
Yeah.
Dallin, like for sure. Justin Medeiros. And I've seen the dollars and cents of that impact, because I work with those guys. Like, Jason's a kid that I was really his first agent before Daniel and Cooper took him over. And these guys move the needle, honestly. Like an NFL player, sometimes, Yeah, it depends. It depends on what we're talking about. Shoes and clothing, yeah, it can be. Supplements, yeah, it can be, but other things maybe not sometimes. But like, yeah, there's definitely those sort of commonalities with those things, for sure.
And do you think it's a unique position we're in a sport, touching on something you briefly mentioned before in regards to, I can't think of many other sports where doing the same thing, i.e., male, females are in essence doing the same thing. But from what it seems like to me, it's almost easier for a female to make it commercially than it is for a male in the CrossFit space, especially now.
I would say that's accurate. There's sort of two sides to that. I think image helps a lot with that on the female side. And that's a compliment. Like they just, look fantastic. They are fantastic. They're like interesting people. There's just so much to love there, honestly, and engage as a fan. Um, and I think that does it is an element that drives the needle for sure. It's at a minimum on the floor it's equal, right? It's like, you go to the Rogue Invitational, they're getting paid the same on either side. That's pride. I'm so proud of that. That's
Yeah.
not normal.
Not at all.
That's not
No,
normal.
exactly right. Yeah.
Because it's like in the end, I think when you take sport, this debate's so heavy in the US right now around soccer, particularly football is what it's properly called, but we call it soccer. But it's
We call it soccer too over here.
okay, good. The women's national team about, equal pay and, how much more money the US men's national team has. And unfortunately, and I get it, it's like, how do we evolve is the real question to answer there. It's like, to be equal at this point is an eyeball problem, and that's something that's really important, is like, women here get as many eyeballs as men do. That's why. So
Exactly.
when those girls are on the floor at the CrossFit Games, it's as if not more interesting to all of us as is the men, and that's what's different. You don't watch women's soccer and men's soccer over here and collectively the group of people say, oh, I love watching both competitions the same. In CrossFit, that's pretty common. Everybody watches it the same, and that's so friggin' cool. So yeah, it's definitely like, on the endorsement side, women are deeper for sure. Which is great, honestly. And the equal pay part from a competitive perspective is so damn cool. But I think better than that, it's not just people doing that. It speaks to the way it works here, right? With the eyeballs. And that's, I want to make sure I am very clear, because that's a controversial subject. I'm not against paying women equal in soccer. I just think I'm very practical and real on the business side. It's like, okay, great. Like, you are right. Like, WNBA is another topic. Caitlin Clark's now a part of it. She's probably going to end up, this like goat of basketball. And she's financially, commercially, through like an NBA player, through the roof. She's like Steph Curry in terms of how she produces. And there's this big debate about pay, from like their pay, the pay they get to play, about how weak it is. Like Caitlin Clark makes $200,000 a year as a basketball player. On the court. She
Of course,
makes
yeah.
about 10 million a year off the court, but she's like the best player in the league. And it's like, well, that should be more. And it's like, okay, well, fine, but why? And it's like, because men get paid more. And it's like, no, that's not the path. You are right. And it should be every dollar it should be, is my perspective. And it's eyeballs that drive that. It's like, hey, if you have 10 million viewers and a guy's game has a 10 million viewers, you're right. You
Sure.
couldn't be
Yeah.
more right, and that's how it should be measured. And that's the thing but one thing I will say on female sports, and I'm a huge fan, is I'm watching a lot more of it. I watch
Yeah.
women's basketball. She's so interesting. I really am a fan of hers and I enjoy it. I watch a ton of soccer on the female side. So I'm not necessarily the fan that is disengaged. I love it. I think that's the issue with the business units, is that they don't have enough eyeballs to equal that pay. They wouldn't be able to continue to do what they do if they're just going to equal the pay. Like US women's soccer would go out of business, because there's not the revenues.
Yeah, and people don't want to talk about that side of it. They want to lean into the side of it, of the inequality and all that. But when you actually can tangibly put it to viewership numbers, which it is, like that's all it, like brands want numbers of viewers. Networks want numbers of viewers to be able to pay more money for the rights, and that's logical when you're looking at it logically. Like that makes sense, but everyone wants to make it an emotional argument and tie it into a whole bunch of other shit that's going on in society at the moment. But
Totally.
um, but then you have other sports like tennis where women get paid the same and they do less work.
It's a great
Like
example.
they
It's funny. I've been on that debate with Todd from Wild on Earth because you're right. They're on the court less.
less time,
Is
man. It's crazy.
do you know that they make the same from a prize money perspective, but the endorsement money is less because of that?
It
Because
is
they
less, yeah.
literally are, it's so dialed now about like with metrics and data that it's just like, hey, you're on the TV this amount of time, this is how much you get paid. I had a little experience with negotiating a deal with a tennis player that Todd was when he was at Noble, and that was like the path it took, and I learned so much. It was like, oh, this is awesome, but it was very data driven. It was like, hey, he's a guy, he's going to play 5 sets, and he's going to have that left sleeve on the screen for this many hours, and it's, you know, it's pretty dialed on that side. But yeah, it's equal pay from the, it's funny, the reversed argument, I didn't know this until recently. There's fighting about that internally about how that doesn't make sense because they spend less time on the court. I didn't realize that as much until recently, that was a debate that goes on internally. So, um, you know,
Yeah,
men
I
might
know.
think
I know the
they're less
boys.
money.
The
Go
boys
ahead.
always, the boys tennis players always talk about it. They're like, we're out here for 5 hours, and they can be done in 45 minutes, and it's like
That's
we're
awesome.
doing more work. We're doing more work, and
That is a sport proud of and markets that heavily is like, you know, I think it's the longest running equal pay sport platform. Like I think they, you know, Billie Jean King, if people know any tennis history, was big with this way back 35 years ago, apparently, that's when the moment broke, and had been equal prize money play for like 30 or 35 years. It's pretty wild.
I think the connection for me, where potentially the biggest opportunity for CrossFit lies, is that in these sports like tennis, like golf, they're sports people can play recreationally until pretty much whatever age, really. Like you can go to a tennis club here, you can find up
So true.
80 year olds, 90 year olds. Golf, same thing. Obviously, it's a different level they're playing at, but they're still able to do so. And I think CrossFit has more parallels with that than something like we touched on with, say, football and their cleats. It's like, why do you need cleats unless you're playing? Like, and my understanding is there ain't that many like recreational leagues, and if there are, you're not doing it till that old. So, like, the market is so much smaller. Whereas these sports where it's equipment based, apparel based, and you can do it for a long time span, the ability to then sell products to a larger demographic of people is there.
It's so true. We're definitely on tip of spear on that with tennis. I mean, there's not many analogies there. I couldn't agree more, but you're right. I mean, that's why tennis is one of the most lucrative markets in the world. And people I don't know that the money in tennis is
It's crazy, man.
ridiculous. It's so wild. I mean, like you look at a major championship, then you can take it right to golf. And a major champion in golf wins the Masters, they get a check for like 2.5 to 3 million on the top. You know, the purse is probably like 25 to 30 million. The purse is 45 million per age, I mean per gender in the US Open, and they're getting $5 million checks on both on the top. It's a bigger in like golf has the feel it's a bigger sport. You know, it's not. I mean, and by the way, both are sports you can play. Longevity exists, all that. Tennis is massive,
Well,
massive.
I think it's a United States thing that you guys sort of sleep on tennis a little bit. Obviously, you guys have like
Right.
college programs and high school programs, but you've got so many other sports that talent gets pushed to that if you look at tennis in Europe and even here in Australia, it's people don't sleep on it as seeing it as a huge sport. I just think it gets drowned out by the other sports you guys have there. But like you said, even Wimbledon, you win Wimbledon, I think it's like £4.5 million. Like that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild.
It's
It's wild. You're spot on the US thing. We have like, I mean, truly too much going on with sports here. It's wild. It's insane. It's like right now is the snapshot of it. It's like basketball's going, hockey's going, they're in their season, but football's finishing. But college football is arguably more significant than the NFL, right? And so you have these, like, you talk about, like, you put the TV on any day and you're like, it's chaos. Like, there are just games. Women's basketball college, men's basketball college, women's basketball pro, men's basketball pro, all these things. Women's basketball pro is not going on right now, but men's is. Like, I mean, I don't know. It's interesting, and it's kind of like for CrossFitters why CrossFit season is when it is. You can't compete with that
No
for
way.
eyeballs. So you got to stay away from it all. You got to be like, when can I put my world championship that nothing else is going on? That's one thing of genius from CrossFit side. That August into July is an awesome time for
Because
that
it's
to
sort of a
get.
dead zone. It is a dead zone in terms of
Yeah,
even around the world.
it's a perfect time to do it because there's not a lot else going on, on the sports side.
Yeah, sweet. Well, we've done an hour, my man. I think
It's awesome.
we'll wrap it up here. I definitely, if you're open to it, would love to have you back, and we can continue deep diving on
Let's
some
do
of
it.
this stuff. But yeah, it's been great to
Hello.
shoot the breeze.
I could talk to you for days. So we
Yeah, for
won't do
sure,
this
man.
to everybody on the other end this time,
Yeah,
but let's do it again. Thank you.
for
Thank you
sure,
for
man.
having me. It's been great catching up, and it's great to hear a little bit about you. We did prior, but congrats on stuff going on your end, and
Thank you so
I'm
much.
pumped to catch up.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, everybody, Mr. Matt O'Keefe.